My best friend called me crying and said that my boyfriend was obsessed with her. So I woke her up from her delusion. Me and Jasmine had been best friends since middle school when she moved from Arizona and didn't know anyone. I introduced her to my friend group, helped her catch up in classes, and we became inseparable. We went to different colleges but stayed close, talking every day and visiting each other monthly. After graduation, we both moved back to our hometown and got apartments 10 minutes apart. That's when I started dating Alex. Alex worked at the engineering firm downtown, and we met through my cousin's birthday party. He was shy, funny, and genuinely kind. Jasmine was happy for me at first, saying it was about time I found someone decent after my string of terrible relationships. She'd come to our movie nights, join us for dinner, and everything was normal for about 4 months. Then Jasmine started acting weird. She'd text me after hanging out saying Alex kept staring at her. I'd laugh it off because Alex barely made eye contact with anyone besides me due to his social anxiety. She'd say he was finding excuses to sit next to her when we all went out. In reality, I always sat in the middle with Alex on one side and Jasmine on the other. She started dressing up more when she knew Alex would be around, wearing low-cut tops and asking if she looked good. Alex never noticed because he was usually showing me memes on his phone or talking about work. One night, Jasmine called me crying at 11 p.m. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She kept saying she was sorry and didn't mean for it to happen. I thought someone died. Finally, she managed to say that Alex was in love with her and she didn't know how to handle it. I asked what she meant. She said she'd been picking up on signs for weeks and it was killing her to keep this from me. I asked what signs. She said he always laughed at her jokes. He laughed at everyone's jokes because he was polite. She said he complimented her new haircut last week. He said it looked nice after she directly asked him 3 times if he noticed anything different. She said he texted her about my birthday gift ideas, which proved he was using me as an excuse to talk to her. I reminded her I literally asked him to text her because she was helping me plan the party. She said I was in denial and she could prove it. The next day, Jasmine showed up at my apartment with a whole presentation. She had analyzed Alex's social media likes and noticed he'd liked 5 of her photos in the past year. 5 photos out of hundreds she posted. She said his favorite coffee shop was near her gym, which meant he was hoping to run into her. His favorite coffee shop was there before she ever joined that gym. She said he mentioned her name 12 times at dinner last week. We were literally talking about her new job, so obviously her name came up. She started crying again, saying she never wanted to hurt me, but the heart wants what it wants. She actually said that. I asked if Alex ever told her he had feelings for her. She said he didn't need to use words when his actions were so obvious. I called Alex right there on speaker, asked him directly what he thought about Jasmine. He said she seemed nice, but kind of intense lately, and asked if she was okay. Jasmine grabbed my phone and told Alex he didn't need to hide anymore, that I knew about their connection. Alex asked what connection. She said the way he looked at her, talked to her, how he was always trying to be near her. Alex said he was confused and asked if Jasmine was drunk. She started yelling that he was gaslighting her and they both knew what was between them. Alex told me my friend needed professional help and hung up. Jasmine said his denial proved he was in love with her. 2 days later, Jasmine texted Alex saying I gave her permission to explore their feelings and asked him to meet her for coffee. Alex sent me the texts immediately and asked if Jasmine was having a mental breakdown. I confronted Jasmine and she said she was testing him to prove his feelings. She literally thought he'd jump at the chance to be with her. When he didn't respond to her follow-up texts, she said he was playing hard to get. She started showing up at his work during lunch. Security had to escort her out twice. She told the security guard she was Alex's girlfriend, and I was the crazy ex who wouldn't let go. The security guard called Alex to confirm, and Alex said he'd never dated her and to call the police if she came back. She joined his gym and would stand next to him on the treadmills. He switched gyms. She found out which one and joined that too. He started working out at home. She told our entire friend group that Alex was sending mixed signals and leading her on while staying with me out of pity. Most of them knew she was being insane, but a few started questioning things because she was so convinced. I had to show them the unhinged texts she'd sent both of us. The breaking point came when she showed up at Alex's parents' house during Sunday dinner. Alex's mom opened the door with her reading glasses still perched on her nose, looking at Jasmine with this confused smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She asked how Jasmine knew their address since they'd only met twice before at casual dinners. Jasmine didn't answer, just pushed past her into the house saying she needed to talk to Alex without me there manipulating everything. I heard Alex's voice from the dining room getting higher and panicked, asking his mom what was happening. His dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up fast. I was still at my apartment when my phone buzzed with Alex's text that just said, "Help, she's here," and my stomach dropped because I knew exactly who he meant. Alex's dad walked into the entryway and told Jasmine in this firm voice that she needed to leave right now. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears, and she said she just needed 5 minutes to explain everything, that Alex had been secretly reaching out to her, and she couldn't keep pretending anymore. Alex's parents looked at each other with these worried faces because their son was literally backing away from Jasmine toward the kitchen. Alex's mom put her hand on his shoulder and asked if he was okay. Jasmine kept talking about signs and hidden messages, and how Alex's love for her was so obvious to everyone except his controlling girlfriend. Alex's dad repeated that she needed to leave, louder this time. Jasmine sat down on their couch like she lived there and said she wasn't going anywhere until Alex admitted his true feelings. I drove to Alex's parents' house going way over the speed limit, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I pulled up 10 minutes later, Jasmine was sitting on their front porch with her arms crossed. Alex's mom was standing by the door looking completely lost about what to do. Jasmine saw me get out of my car and immediately started talking to Alex's mom about how I'd been emotionally abusing Alex for months. She said I kept him away from his friends, monitored his phone, and made him feel guilty for having any life outside our relationship. Alex's mom looked at me like she was trying to figure out if any of this could possibly be true. I walked up the porch steps and Jasmine stood up, getting right in my face. She said Alex deserved someone who trusted him, someone who didn't need to control every second of his day. I could see the neighbors' curtains moving as people watched this scene play out on a quiet Sunday evening. I tried to keep my voice calm and told Jasmine she needed professional help. She laughed this bitter laugh and said that's exactly what manipulative people say when they're losing control. Alex's dad came outside with his phone in his hand and said he was calling the police. Jasmine's whole face changed and she screamed that I was the one who needed help, that my insecurity was so bad I had to invent this whole story about her being obsessed. She yelled about how I couldn't handle that Alex might have feelings for someone else, someone better. More neighbors came outside now, standing in their yards watching. An older man from across the street started walking over asking if everything was all right. Jasmine turned to him and said her boyfriend's crazy ex was harassing her. Alex appeared in the doorway looking pale and exhausted. The neighbor looked confused, asking Alex if he knew what was going on. 2 police cars pulled up about 5 minutes later. Jasmine immediately stopped yelling and wiped her face, switching to this calm, rational voice that made my skin crawl because it was so fake. She smiled at the officer and said there'd been a misunderstanding, that she came to visit her boyfriend and his parents overreacted. The officer asked who the boyfriend was, and Jasmine pointed at Alex. The officer walked over to Alex and asked directly if this woman was his girlfriend. Alex said no, he'd never dated her and she needed to leave. The officer asked if Alex wanted her here, and Alex said absolutely not. Jasmine's face did this thing where it just crumpled, like someone had reached inside and pulled all her bones out. She looked at Alex with these huge wounded eyes and said he didn't have to lie anymore, that she understood his family was putting pressure on him. The officer asked Jasmine to come with him to her car. She stood up slowly, staring at Alex the whole time like she was waiting for him to change his mind. The officer had to physically guide her by the elbow because she kept stopping and turning back. When they got to her car, the officer talked to her for a few minutes while his partner took statements from Alex and his parents. Jasmine got in her car finally and started the engine. As she drove away, she rolled down her window and screamed that Alex was making a huge mistake. She yelled that one day he'd realize what he gave up, that he'd come crawling back when he got tired of being controlled. Her voice got quieter as she drove down the street, but we could still hear her. Alex's mom grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. She was shaking. Inside the house, Alex sat on the couch with his head in his hands. His whole body was trembling, and his parents kept asking what the hell just happened. I sat down next to Alex and started explaining from the beginning, from the night Jasmine called me crying about Alex being in love with her. I told them about the presentation with the social media analysis, about her showing up at his work, about the text claiming I gave permission for them to date. Alex's mom's mouth fell open, and she kept saying she had no idea, that Jasmine seemed so normal when they met her before. His dad paced around the living room, getting angrier as I talked. When I finished, his dad said we needed to talk to a lawyer first thing Monday morning. He said this wasn't just weird friend drama anymore, this was stalking, and we needed legal protection. That night, Alex stayed at my apartment because neither of us wanted to be alone. We lay in bed, but neither of us could sleep. Every sound made us both jump. A car door slamming outside had Alex sitting straight up. When my neighbor's cat knocked over something in the hallway, I was out of bed before I even realized I was moving. Around 3 a.m, Alex admitted he was scared of what Jasmine might do next. He said every time we set a boundary or told her no, she just became more convinced they had this deep connection. He talked about how she'd shown up at 2 different gyms, how she'd told security at his work that she was his girlfriend, how she genuinely seemed to believe her own lies. I realized we weren't dealing with a friendship problem anymore. This was a real safety threat, and we needed to treat it that way. Sunday morning, I called my cousin Cordelia, who worked in mental health crisis intervention. She answered on the second ring, even though it was barely 8. I explained everything while Alex made coffee in the kitchen, his hands still shaky. Cordelia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a minute. Then she said Jasmine's behavior matched something called erotomania. She explained it was a delusional disorder where someone believes another person is in love with them, even when there's clear proof they're not. She said people with erotomania can be completely normal in other areas of their life, but have this one fixed delusion they can't let go of. I asked if it was dangerous, and Cordelia's voice got serious. She said it could be, especially when the delusion gets challenged. Cordelia explained that people with erotomania interpret rejections as secret tests, or proof of hidden feelings. She said when Alex told Jasmine he wasn't interested, Jasmine's brain twisted that into evidence that he was forced to deny their connection. Every boundary we set, every time we said no, just made her more certain. Cordelia told us we needed to document absolutely everything from now on. Save every text, every voicemail, write down every incident with dates and times. She said we needed to stop all direct communication immediately, because any response, even telling her to stop, would feed the delusion. Most importantly, she said we needed legal protection right away. She used the word restraining order and said these situations could turn violent when the person's delusion got threatened enough. I looked at Alex standing in my kitchen doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee, and I saw real fear in his eyes. Monday morning, Alex's dad made a call to someone named Lincoln Abernathy before we even finished breakfast. He handed Alex the phone, and I watched Alex nod along, his jaw tight, saying yes sir and thank you about 6 times. When he hung up, his dad said Lincoln could see us at 10, and we should bring everything. I grabbed my laptop and Alex collected his phone while his mom packed the leftover police report and witness statements into a folder. We drove to Lincoln's office in the business district downtown, a brick building with his name on a brass plaque by the door. The waiting room had leather chairs and magazines nobody ever reads, and a receptionist who smiled too brightly considering why people probably came here. Lincoln came out exactly at 10, a man maybe 50 years old wearing a suit that looked expensive but not flashy. He shook our hands with a firm grip and led us back to his office where he had a yellow legal pad already out on his desk. We sat across from him and I put my laptop between us while Alex set his phone down. Lincoln asked us to start from the beginning and explain everything, so I opened my laptop and pulled up the first weird text Jasmine sent me about Alex staring at her. Lincoln took notes while I talked, his pen moving fast across the yellow paper. I showed him the text where Jasmine said I gave her permission to date Alex, and Lincoln's expression got harder. Alex pulled up the messages Jasmine sent him directly asking to meet for coffee and the follow-up texts when he didn't respond. Lincoln read them twice, his mouth pressed into a thin line. Then Alex showed him the emails from his office security about the 2 incidents where they escorted Jasmine out, and Lincoln asked if he could photograph those with his phone. I found the police report from Sunday dinner on my laptop and turned the screen, so Lincoln could read the whole thing. He scrolled through it slowly, occasionally making small sounds in his throat that weren't quite words. When he finished reading, he sat back in his chair and looked at both of us with an expression I couldn't totally read. He said we had more than enough evidence for a restraining order, way more than most cases he saw. Then he said the word that made my stomach drop: criminal stalking charges. Lincoln explained that what Jasmine did met the legal definition in multiple ways: the workplace harassment, the residential trespassing, the repeated unwanted contact after being told to stop. He said the process would require me and Alex to testify about specific incidents in detail, dates and times, and exactly what happened. His voice got more serious when he said Jasmine would be formally notified of the restraining order filing, and he wanted us prepared that this might trigger another escalation before things got better. He used the word escalation like it was a normal thing to expect, and I realized this was his job, seeing people at their worst and predicting what terrible thing might happen next. We spent the next 3 hours in that office going through every single incident in order. Lincoln had us write detailed statements on his computer, typing out exactly what happened with dates and times for everything we could remember. Alex had to describe the first time Jasmine showed up at his gym, how he felt when he saw her on the treadmill next to him, even though there were 20 empty machines. He typed slowly, stopping every few sentences to take a breath, and I could see his hands shaking slightly over the keyboard. I wrote about the night she called me crying, the presentation she made with the social media analysis, the moment she grabbed my phone to talk to Alex directly. Lincoln asked specific questions about each incident, like did anyone else witness this? Did you tell her explicitly to stop? Did you feel threatened or afraid? Some of the questions felt obvious, but Lincoln said courts needed everything spelled out clearly, no assumptions about what someone meant or felt. Alex got to the part about Jasmine joining his second gym after he switched, and he stopped typing completely for a minute. I watched him stare at the screen before he finally wrote that it made him feel violated, like nowhere was safe, like she was always going to find him no matter what he did. Lincoln nodded and said that was exactly the kind of detail the judge needed to hear. By the time we finished, my back hurt from sitting in the same chair, and Alex looked completely drained. Lincoln printed everything out and had us review it one more time, then sign at the bottom of each page. He said he'd file the petition for an emergency restraining order first thing Wednesday morning, and we should expect Jasmine to be served with papers within 48 hours of that. That afternoon, my phone rang while Alex and I were eating sandwiches in my car outside a gas station. It was Myra, and she sounded upset before she even said hello. She told me Jasmine had shown up at her apartment that morning crying and saying Alex got his family to threaten her with lawyers. Myra said Jasmine claimed we were ganging up on her because Alex didn't want to admit his feelings publicly, and his parents were helping him hide the truth. I could hear the uncertainty in Myra's voice, like she was starting to question the version Jasmine had been telling everyone. She asked me directly if that was true, if Alex's family really threatened Jasmine. I told her no. Jasmine trespassed at their house during Sunday dinner, and they called the police, which was not a threat, but a legal response to someone breaking the law. Myra went quiet for a few seconds, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. She said she was starting to realize the version Jasmine told her might not be accurate. She mentioned little things that hadn't made sense, like how Jasmine said Alex texted her constantly but could never show the actual texts, or how the timeline of events kept shifting depending on when Jasmine told the story. I felt this mix of relief that Myra was finally questioning things and anger that it took this long, that Jasmine got to control the narrative for weeks while Alex and I dealt with actual stalking. I told Myra I would send her everything, all the evidence we just gave to Lincoln. I pulled over into a parking lot so I could focus and started forwarding screenshots of Jasmine's text to Alex, the ones where she said I gave permission for them to date, the ones where she asked him to meet her after he'd already said no. I sent the security incident reports from Alex's office that documented both times they escorted her out. I sent the police report from Sunday with the officer's notes about Jasmine refusing to leave the property and claiming she was there to talk to her boyfriend, which Alex had to correct by saying he'd never dated her. Myra didn't respond for almost 10 minutes, and I sat there watching the 3 dots appear and disappear on my phone screen. Finally, she called me back instead of texting. She said she felt sick that she doubted me, that she'd actually wondered if maybe I was being controlling or jealous like Jasmine suggested. She admitted Jasmine's story had inconsistencies, but her certainty made it believable, the way she could describe these elaborate scenarios with so much detail that it felt like they must have happened. Myra said she should have asked more questions, should have talked to me and Alex directly instead of just accepting Jasmine's version. I told her it was okay, even though part of me was still angry, because I understood how convincing Jasmine could be when she believed her own delusions so completely. Myra said 3 other friends from our group wanted to apologize and hear the real story directly from me. She suggested we meet at the coffee shop on Main Street the next day, somewhere public and neutral. I felt this weird mix of emotions, relief that they were finally listening, but also frustration that it took lawyers and police reports for them to take this seriously. I agreed to meet them at 2 in the afternoon, and after I hung up, Alex reached over and squeezed my hand. He didn't say anything, but I could see in his face that he felt the same complicated mixture of vindication and exhaustion. The next day, I walked into the coffee shop and saw Myra sitting at a big table in the corner with 3 other friends from our group. They all looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and not quite making eye contact when I first sat down. I opened my laptop and pulled up the timeline I'd created for Lincoln, every incident with dates and descriptions. I turned the screen so they could all see and started walking them through it chronologically. Their faces changed as they read, going from uncertain to shocked to horrified. When they got to the text where Jasmine claimed I gave her permission to date Alex, Myra actually gasped. She said Jasmine had told them Alex sent that message to Jasmine as a test, to see if she'd actually meet him, which was the complete opposite of reality. I showed them Alex's response where he forwarded Jasmine's message to me immediately asking if she was having a breakdown. One of the other friends, a girl named Sarah, put her hand over her mouth and shook her head. Another friend admitted that Jasmine had been privately messaging each of them with slightly different versions of events. Sarah said Jasmine told her that Alex confessed feelings during a work event, but told Myra that he'd shown up at her apartment and told someone else that they'd been secretly texting for months. None of them had compared notes until now because Jasmine specifically asked each person to keep their conversations private, saying she was embarrassed and didn't want everyone knowing her business. They realized now that she'd been manipulating them by controlling the information flow, making sure nobody could piece together that her stories didn't match. A third friend, a guy named Marcus, said Jasmine had asked him to spy on me and report back what I was saying about Alex. He'd thought it was weird at the time, but Jasmine framed it like she was worried about me and wanted to make sure I was okay. He said he felt like an idiot now for not seeing through it. The friend group sat there for another hour talking through everything, and by the end, they all agreed to cut contact with Jasmine completely. Myra said they'd provide witness statements if Lincoln needed them, documenting how Jasmine tried to manipulate them and spread false information about Alex. It felt validating to have them finally understand and believe me, but it also felt deeply sad. Our entire social circle was fracturing, splitting into people who supported us and people who'd have to cut ties with Jasmine. The Jasmine I knew for 15 years, the girl who moved from Arizona and didn't know anyone, who I helped with homework and invited to everything, felt like a complete stranger now. I didn't recognize her in the person who showed up at gyms and workplaces and Sunday dinners, who created elaborate false narratives and believed them so completely that she could convince others. When I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time, relieved to have support, but grieving the friendship that was never coming back. Wednesday morning, Lincoln called to say he'd filed for the emergency restraining order at the courthouse. He explained that Jasmine would be served with papers within 48 hours, meaning someone would show up at her apartment or workplace and hand her official legal documents. He said we should expect her to either love bomb us with apologies or escalate with anger when she realized this was legally serious, that the court system was now involved and this wasn't just friend drama anymore. He told us not to respond to any contact attempt regardless of what she said, that any response would reset the harassment clock and potentially weaken our case. He said to document everything, save every text and voicemail and email, note every time she drove past our apartments or showed up somewhere we were. His voice was calm, but firm when he said the next few days were critical, that this was when people with delusions either were accepted reality or doubled down harder. I thanked him and hung up, then immediately told Alex what Lincoln said. We both felt this strange anticipation, like waiting for a storm we knew was coming, but couldn't predict exactly when it would hit. That night, my phone started buzzing around 8 p.m. and didn't stop. Jasmine's name kept flashing on the screen over and over, each call going to voicemail when I didn't pick up. Lincoln had been clear about not answering, about not giving her any opening to claim we were still in contact, or that I was encouraging her behavior. I watched the notifications pile up, 17 missed calls in 2 hours, and each one felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Alex sat next to me on the couch looking at his own phone, his jaw tight as he scrolled through work emails trying to distract himself from the constant buzzing coming from my device. The voicemails accumulated in my inbox, little red numbers climbing higher and higher. And part of me desperately wanted to listen, because somewhere in my brain I still believed my actual friend might be in there somewhere, might say something that would make this all make sense. But I knew better now. Knew that the Jasmine leaving those messages wasn't the girl I'd known since middle school, and listening would only hurt me more without changing anything about the situation we were trapped in. The next morning, Alex's phone lit up with a text from Quentin at work. I watched his face go pale as he read it. Then he turned the screen toward me without saying anything. Jasmine had shown up at their office building again, apparently thinking she could just walk in and see Alex like nothing had happened, like Lincoln hadn't filed legal paperwork and warned her to stay away. Security recognized her immediately from the previous incidents and called the police before she even made it through the lobby doors. Quentin's text said she'd been arrested for trespassing since the building management had formally banned her from the property after the second time she'd harassed Alex during his lunch break. She was in police custody now, actually arrested with handcuffs and everything, and the reality of how far this had escalated hit me like a truck. This wasn't just friend drama anymore or even stalking that we could document and report. This was criminal charges and jail time and a permanent record that would follow Jasmine for the rest of her life. Lincoln called an hour later and his voice was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath when he explained what happened. Jasmine had spent 4 hours in a holding cell before her parents posted bail and got her released, and he said this actually strengthened our restraining order case significantly because it showed the pattern continuing even after police involvement and official warnings. The judge would take it seriously when we went to court, would see that Jasmine wasn't just confused or going through a rough patch, but actively refusing to respect boundaries even when those boundaries were enforced by law enforcement. He told us to keep documenting everything, to save any texts or calls or attempts at contact, because each piece of evidence made our case stronger and showed we genuinely needed legal protection from someone who wouldn't stop on her own. Friday morning, my phone rang with an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer, thinking it might be Jasmine calling from a different phone to get around being blocked. But something made me pick up, and Jasmine's mom's voice came through the speaker, choked with tears and barely coherent. She said they'd had no idea things had gotten this bad, that Jasmine had been telling them Alex was her boyfriend and I was a jealous ex-friend trying to break them up out of spite. They'd believed her because why wouldn't they believe their own daughter? and now they were devastated to learn the truth from the police report and the trespassing charges and everything we'd documented. Her mom kept apologizing over and over, saying she should have known something was wrong when Jasmine's stories didn't quite add up, when she refused to let them meet Alex or got defensive when they asked normal questions about the relationship. I felt bad for her because I knew what it was like to watch someone you love disappear into delusion, to realize the person you thought you knew had been replaced by someone you didn't recognize at all. Jasmine's dad got on the phone after her mom couldn't talk anymore through the crying. His voice was tight and controlled, like he was barely holding himself together, and he asked if there was any way to resolve this without legal action, because they were trying to get Jasmine into psychiatric treatment. I understood what he was asking, understood that he wanted to protect his daughter from having a restraining order and criminal record. But I also remembered Alex's face when Jasmine showed up at his parents' house during Sunday dinner. I explained as gently as I could that we'd tried everything else, that we'd been patient and understanding and given Jasmine so many chances to stop. But she'd showed up at Alex's family home, and that crossed a line we couldn't uncross. He went quiet for a long moment and then said he understood, that they'd cooperate with whatever we needed and provide any information that might help get Jasmine the mental health treatment she clearly required. Before he hung up, he said he was sorry. Not just for what Jasmine had done, but for not seeing it sooner. And I felt tears running down my face because this whole situation was destroying so many people beyond just me and Alex. Lincoln called back Tuesday afternoon to tell us the restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. He walked us through what to expect, explaining that Jasmine would be in the courtroom because she had the right to face her accusers and defend herself against the order. He warned us that she might try to speak directly to Alex, might try to make eye contact or gesture or do anything to get his attention and prove their connection was real. We needed to stay calm no matter what happened, needed to let the legal process work, and trust that the judge would see through her delusion to the documented pattern of harassment and stalking. He said to dress professionally but not fancy, to answer questions clearly and honestly, and to focus on facts rather than emotions when we testified about what she'd done. His voice was steady and reassuring, but I could tell he was preparing us for how hard this was going to be, for having to face Jasmine in person, and recount everything she'd done while she sat there watching us. That weekend, Alex and I barely left my apartment, ordering takeout and watching movies we'd already seen, because neither of us could focus on anything new. We were both emotionally exhausted, drained from weeks of constant stress and fear, and looking over our shoulders everywhere we went. Alex kept apologizing like this was somehow his fault for being polite to my friend, for laughing at her jokes and complimenting her haircut when she asked directly, for all the normal friendly behavior that her brain had twisted into proof of secret love. It broke my heart because he'd done absolutely nothing wrong, had just been his usual kind and socially anxious self, and now he was carrying guilt for something that existed only in Jasmine's delusion. I told him over and over that this wasn't his fault, that mental illness doesn't need a reason or a cause, but I could see he didn't fully believe me yet. Sunday evening, I finally gave in to the temptation I'd been fighting all week and listened to one of Jasmine's voicemails. I regretted it immediately, wished I could unhear her sobbing voice saying she knew Alex was forced to do this by his controlling family, that their love was tested like Romeo and Juliet or some other tragic romance. She said she'd wait for him no matter how long it took, that real love could survive anything, including restraining orders and family interference and temporary separations. Her voice had this dreamy quality to it, like she was narrating a movie in her head instead of talking about real life with real consequences, and I felt sick listening to how completely she believed the false reality she'd constructed. I deleted the voicemail and blocked her number on yet another level, then sat there feeling dirty and sad and angry all at once. Cordelia showed up at my apartment that evening with Thai food and a determined expression. She'd taken time to help us prepare mentally for the hearing, explaining in her calm professional voice that facing Jasmine in court might be harder than we expected, because delusional people can be very convincing in their false reality. They believe what they're saying completely, with no doubt or hesitation, and that conviction can make others question what they know to be true. She said we needed to stay grounded in facts, in the documented evidence and witness statements and police reports, rather than getting pulled into the emotional story Jasmine would tell. She practiced questions with us, had us recount incidents clearly and specifically, and reminded us that the judge had seen cases like this before and would know what to look for in someone experiencing erotomania. Monday night, I couldn't sleep no matter how tired I was, my brain refusing to shut off as I lay there staring at my ceiling. I kept thinking about middle school Jasmine who'd moved from Arizona and didn't know anyone, how scared and alone she'd looked that first day, until I invited her to sit with my friend group at lunch. I remembered helping her catch up in classes, introducing her to everyone, promising we'd always be friends no matter what, because that's what best friends did. The grief of losing that person to mental illness hit me in waves, rolling over me until I was crying in a way I hadn't let myself since this whole nightmare started. Alex held me while I sobbed, not saying anything because there was nothing to say, and I mourned the friendship that had shaped who I was for 15 years, but would never exist again in any form I recognized.